not going to post links in the description of all the stuff I'm using on this, because I'm using everything from eBay, Amazon, AliExpress, and the links tend to go dead. I'm going to post pictures of them so you can see what it looks like, and the picture will also have the description of it, so you can use those for keywords for your search. These spacer tubes have a recessed area in them. I think they're supposed to go like this, and you can see how it'll sit low. This much will be sticking out above the fork cap. If I turn it over, it hits a stop. It seems to work like that, but it'll keep the fork lower. I'm not wanting to lowrider my bike, so it looks like it has two different height settings. So that's probably a difference of probably half an inch. So I'm going to go with this way, so the fork sits lower. These slide up in here. It looks like they fit all the way up. Then the fork goes in there. But because of the sag issue, I'm going to try to limit mine to 50. Right now I'm just trying to get less travel and less race sag. Yeah, could not find heavier springs. I think these springs, I mean, for how tiny they are, they're pretty heavy. They have a really thick coil. So I'm going to try to do spacers inside of them. These are 15 millimeter spacers. If I go with 2 of them, I'll be at 30 millimeters. I was actually able to get the 30 millimeters of spacers in there, amazingly, and get the thread started cleanly. So we'll see if that knocks our travel down. Alright, here's max travel with 30 millimeters of spacers in it. We're going to call those preload spacers. You know, you add preload to the forks to get rid of sag, and there's a certain point where you need heavier springs. We are at that point, but we can't find heavier springs, so we're going to ghetto it. We're just going to add more spacers, kind of like Maddog would do. And we're at 50 millimeters. So we'll call it 50 millimeters of travel. Got my zip tie on my fork. We're going to see what rider sag is, or race sag, with the 30 millimeters of spacers installed. I also got a rider sag of 12 millimeters. That's pretty good. And I've got a full travel of, I think it was 49 point something. We'll call it 50. Yeah, it looks like 49.4. So 49.4. That would make 12 millimeters, 24% sag. I'll take that. Yeah, I was shooting for 30, but I think 24 will work just fine. That still gives me some sag, and I'm not taking away too much travel. All right, now we've got a new max travel of 50 millimeters. We're going to check the clearance, just like we did before. We came really close to achieving our max travel of 50 now. But we cleared up top, but we hit back there. So I've got an idea, because I am determined to keep this brake on the left. I'm determined to keep this axle to the rear, so I get that nice shorter trail. This is the Michelin City Grip, the best scooter tire money can buy. It's between 70 and 90 bucks. This is the Xing Wang Wu-Tang Clan. Probably a crappy tire that comes on your Maddog. The Michelin is 120 by 70. The Wuhan Virus tire is 120 by 80. Theoretically, That's a 1/2 inch on each side. So we're going to find out. Now for the moment of truth. Will this tire, this new 120 by 70, hit the frame under full compression? If it does, we're going to have to turn the tire around on the wheel and then mount the brake on the other side. There's full compression. Hell yeah, I've got clearance. So that's a good news. We not only upgraded the tire to a better tire, but we got more clearance with the 30 millimeters of spacers in there and the proper sag. We're now able to clear the frame and keep the brake on the left side behind the axle with the axle mounted rearward like God intended. So these are Buddy Roughhouse forks, and Buddy Roughhouse is kind of tough to find. It's all about this combo, the axle and the 2 caliper bolts. Pay no mind to how that's jacked up, I'm just doing some measuring. And so this combo also happens in something called a Yamaha jog. And I've found a lot more availability of stuff for a Yamaha jog. So I'm going to consider the front of my bike here now the Yamaha jog. So the brake rotor will be a Ruckus, even though it's really not, but it searches that way. And the forks and the front end will be a Yamaha jog 50, the jog 50, that's important. The 125s and up have a different pattern here. This is a 3-bolt 70 millimeter. So each of these bolts are 70 millimeters apart, and there's 3 of them. So the center hole is 58. Technically that bolt to bolt measurement is 68. I've seen them listed as 68 and 70. I ordered a 70 bolt to bolt. We're gonna see. Since we have Buddy and Roughhouse forks, we could put the stock brake caliper on there and it would reach if the Buddy and Roughhouse had 180 millimeter, but I don't think they do. I think they make an adapter to stick them out to 200 millimeters or 220. The stock brake is a 180. I have to either go with the 160 with no bracket on it, which would look really clean, but I don't know if I want the 160 stopping power, or put the bracket on it and go with the 200, which is I think is what I will do to get the more stopping power. And the 200 brakes looks pretty cool. It's floating and everything and fancy. The 160 is just basic like this one. You will lose your magnets. So I've got a GPS speedometer, it doesn't matter. And without the magnets, this speedometer is not going to work. The magnets they use are these, I think 2 millimeter by 10 millimeter. You get a stack of them for cheap, but that would take some machining to figure out how to put them on there. You might could just glue them on there, I don't know. So I thought the 70 millimeter distance between here and here and the 68 were the same, but it turns out there is a 70 and there is a 68. It's so close it fit, but when I took the rotor off, I noticed score marks inside here on the 3 holes. I took my Dremel and I just touched the inside of these right here, just a little bit, and just almost cleaned them up where those score marks were. And I think that'll be enough. 2 millimeters is such a small difference. And if you look right at the center of the bolt, you can see it's not quite centered in these recessed holes now. But I ovaled the slots so the shank fits down in there, but you can see that's how far off it was. And because of that, I'm going to go with the 200 millimeter with the aluminum carrier. It looks cool, it works better because it's 200 millimeters, and the main reason is this is aluminum, and that's pretty easy to cut away. And here you can see, even though I wobbled out the holes a little bit on the inside, it still spins pretty true. And with a jog 50, you would have to have a 160mm rotor, I think, for it to mount right to these two holes. With the 180 that comes on this wheel, you're going to need a bigger one. If I want to go 200, I'm going to need an adapter. They make adapters to go to 200. That's the one I can't find. So I've ordered one on AliExpress that looks like the picture, and I use jog 50 as a search, and I may have found it, so we'll see when I get that. So the mystery bracket I got worked good. That's the one from AliExpress, and it brings it out and fits the 200 rotor perfectly. These miscellaneous bolts, I had in my bolt box. I'll probably try to find some nice looking, something black like this with the hex head. So that's the NCY brake caliper, the AliExpress bracket, and the AliExpress 200mm rotor. I found this same rotor all over the internet, Ruckus 200mm, for $198. But if you go to AliExpress and find it for whatever it said in there, 26 bucks, I forget now. It'll be in the picture up there. When trying to center your axle and get it in position, you're going to need little washers or something like this. Now these fit the 12mm axle. They don't really have to fit good. I'm just using these for temporary use only. You could use these for a permanent solution, but I'm going to use them as temporary so I can get a measurement of what kind of spacers I need. This is a pretty thick one, you can see. I've also got some thin ones. I've got a handful, just an assortment of them, so I can shove on the axle and get the wheel centered where I want it. And then when I get it where I like it, I'll take everything off. I'll measure the factory spacers that are on there, plus these washers, and I'll get a total measurement. I'll take that total measurement and I'll cut myself some spacers out of this stock. That's a 12mm hole. So it's got an outside diameter of 22mm. This is just an aluminum stock. So I'll cut this to size once I measure the factory spacers and the washers. I'll then get rid of the factory spacers altogether and have just one of these on each side, custom fit for my bike. And unless you have a lathe, I wouldn't recommend doing it this way, cutting it yourself, because it always cuts crooked. I'm going to cut them on the lathe, but if you don't have a lathe and you want to get one spacer on each side, so it's a nice clean install, you can order these spacers any length you want on eBay. I've got the factory spacer still in there. It looks like I've got 2 thick washers on this side. And then once I determine that I like the axle in this position, I'll pull that spacer out and those 2 washers. I'll measure the total length and I'll cut me a spacer that overall length. Just be aware that there's a tab right here on the right side of the axle, and that tab is to engage, I think, the speedometer housing on the stock jog, or I should say the Roughhouse 50. And it looks like I'm going to clear that. I may end up taking some of that off with the grinder though. It's pretty close. On both sides, this wheel hub diameter is big enough that it hits the fork over here. If you get that too close, it'll hit the fork before this axle will sync up. But it looks like I'm going to clear it on both sides. You can see how close it is here. So you want the wheel obviously between those 2 touch points. Spacer the wheel and axle exactly where you want it. It's all based on where the caliper attaches. So if your caliper is attached here and you've got it like you like it, I'm using a Yamaha 50 jog caliper. You're going to center this disc in that caliper center, and that's how you're going to space the wheel. So there's a little seam in your caliper, and that's the center of it. Pay no mind to where the pads are right now, but that's the center of your caliper. I want to get a straight edge and lay it across my rotor disc, and so there's about a we can call that a 1/16 to the left. And if I lay it on this side here, I get about a 1/16 to the right. So that's nice and centered. And I want to use my washers to spacer this wheel on that axle till I get that nice and centered. And that's what I'm going to call the right position. I think I've got my axle centered where I want it with the proper spacers in there. You want to make sure you don't have any gaps in there and you end up pinching your forks. So here's my spacers cut. I made these two outside ones to go outside the axle. Take up all this extra axle I've got. These are just pieces of stainless steel exhaust pipe. So they already have the radius that matches fork pretty good. I just took my cutter and cut out little pieces. Made tabs. I'm going to try to mount this to the fender. Then I'll clamp the fender to the forks. That will clear the bolts at full compression. That looks pretty cool without the back piece. That back piece was kind of ugly. I just want it for looks mainly. I'm going to get that thing sitting super low over this tire. Gives it kind of a cool look. Just a splash guard up front. Yeah, I'm just making this shit up as I go. If it doesn't work, I'll get one of those Grom fenders and put on here. Might have got it too low. Alright, here's the final product. I think it came out alright. Looks pretty good even with that little bracket on it. The brake's cool looking. I had to add some spacers in there because the axle was too long. But overall, it'd be good to go. I'll do a test ride video on it when I get the rear shock. I got some extra bumpy roads that are really scary to ride over. I want to see if they're not scary anymore with NCY front and rear.